And Kate Montana is with us. Welcome to Grimerica. Thanks for joining us. How are you, Kate?
Thank you, Graham. I'm in Hawaii. What can I say? I won't rub
Yes.
it in either.
Oh, the place where I love I love Hawaii's wet. Like I love the weather there. How it's just like 85 all year round. You know,
Something
it's
like that.
yeah.
Yeah. I live on the side of a volcano at 4,000 feet, so
Oh,
I
do
have,
you?
I have a little bit more temperate in the 70s, and I don't complain. If I want to get overheated, then I go down the mountain to the beach
On Maui?
on
Yeah.
Maui. Yeah.
That I went up that volcano once and I saw the full. It just happened to be. I don't think I planned it this way. It happened to be the sun setting and the full moon rising. Oh my
Oh,
god,
nice.
it was unbelievable.
I've driven up Haleakala at full moon, and it's like being in a spotlight. It's bit like being kind of in cloudy, foggy weather with the sun out. It's
Right.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful.
Which island is that?
Maui.
Maui.
Yeah, we've got the fourth largest telescope array on the planet here.
Nice. I've never been to Hawaii, but I'm going to the Big Island in April.
Oh, cool. Cool. You know, I never wanted to even visit the Hawaiian Islands. I just figured they were just one more despoiled paradise, and who I didn't want to have to see that. And I was on a book tour with one of my other books, The E Word, that Simon and Schuster brought out in 2017. And I was on a book tour, and anyway, long story short, I was looking for a new place to live because I'd been like 28 years in the Pacific Northwest, and I was so done. And none of the places that I thought I wanted to move, like, Santa Fe or Boulder, Colorado, or, some Santa Barbara, California, some cool place, and nothing, nada. And a friend invited me to come stay on Maui for a month, and I had nothing else going on. I was like, oh, yawn. Okay, I'll go to Maui, whatever. And day 3, literally the spirit of the island just reached out and just grabbed me and went, you come home.
Wow.
You come home and let me take care of you. And it was just like, okay. So I stayed my month, and then I went home and sold everything I owned and shipped my
Wow,
car and
really? Eh?
packed
Holy
2
good
suitcases and came back.
good for you. That's awesome. And it was Maui. Was it Maui that did it too?
It was
Or
Maui. Yeah, I've never been on, well, I've been on a couple of the other islands that have been local to around Maui, but yeah, I haven't been to Kauai. I've kind of passed through Oahu, but every island has its signature frequency, and Maui obviously is mine.
wow, good for you. That's interesting. So, I mean, the one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is, and thanks for coming on last minute and all that. But I mean, I just love the thought about cracking the matrix and is that your latest book?
I actually have another book coming out next month. It's called Gender, Patriarchy, and Sexual Mind Control: Breaking Free.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, another light topic of conversation.
Well, let's make sure we talk about that one before you go for sure. Like let's get a good plug in on that one. That sounds fascinating too. But I mean, just the fact that you've got all this experience in the alternative health and spirituality and all that, and just the fact that you came through everything in the last few years, and you're like, okay, we're going to talk about the evil that's here. Like I got the sense that you came out with your eyes open and you're like aware of sort of what's going on, because I feel like so many communities kind of got split and people just didn't come along like you expected, and you're like, what is happening to half of humanity, even in like our somewhat awake communities?
Yeah, no, I was really shocked, Graham. I've been a alternative medical journalist for 30 years and part of the new age spirituality community, and where everybody's into healthy eating and alternative healing modalities and all this awakenedness. No, I won't go wokeness, but anyway. And then COVID hit, and everybody just seemed to go into a trance. And I had spent 35 years in the whole spiritual arena. I was part of the whole movie. I don't know if you're familiar with the film What the Bleep Do We Know, which came out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That had a huge impact on me. I mean, honestly, I absolutely love that. I'd seen it multiple times. I remember that, yeah, very, very clearly. And it was huge.
I worked with the filmmakers. And
Okay.
I worked with the filmmakers for years, promoting that and interviewing, most all of the scientists around the whole topic of consciousness. and quantum physics and the marriage of quantum physics and mystical states and mysticism and the scientific explanation for all of that. And but I was so shocked, Graham, that when COVID hit, it was like popping the positivity bubble, if you will. It was it certainly popped my positivity bubble. And I looked around at the world and I was like, well, what the hell am I missing? Obviously, I've missed something enormous, because happy thoughts and making a list of positive things and meditating several hours a day, when I get up off my Zazen pillow, the world is falling apart right around my ears. And then, totalitarian regimes moving in and health mandates and all this astonishing stuff was hitting. And I'm like, well, okay, what have I missed? Well, I missed the whole other side of life called the dark side. The dark side. And because, if you're in the whole new age arena, like I was, it was like you focus on the light. It was about being good and pure and moving into your Christ higher self. And it was always about up and out and up to God and the light. And what was the book came out, like, I think in the 80s, is like, you can't afford the luxury of a negative thought. And I remember when that book came out and I looked at it and I was like, and I just aged myself right there. But anyway, I remember looking at that title and going, well, I'm screwed. I mean, you can't afford the luxury of a negative thought. This is impossible. So the whole focus on the happy land, I was like, okay. So I turned around and I decided to research, for lack of a better word, evil. Because evil seemed to be the only word that I could apply to what was going on in the world. And much to my shock, my research led me to the understanding of well, I was raised in the Christian church like so many people, and the whole idea about the devil and the cloven hooves and the horns and the tail and always seemed really kind of childish. It seemed really highly superficial and very limited. So I had completely dismissed that kind of talk about evil. And so then when I started doing research, it was like, well, every culture on every continent for thousands of years, Graham, have the understanding and the name for this, I'll call it a negative force, if you will. A negative entropic parasitic energy. We can call it evil if we want. So the more I researched, it was like, okay, so we hear about the devil, and then we hear the father of lies and the slanderer and the tempter, the evil one. But, for the Hebrews, they had a name. They called it Abaddon. And in Islam, they called it Ash-Shaitan. And the Greeks called this negative kind of a whispering evil entity the archons. And so it just went on and on. The Gnostic texts refer to this presence as the evil principle, an illness kind of that has attached itself to humankind. It doesn't have a physical form, and this parasitic kind of illness uses humans as vehicles to manifest its desires. And I was like, oh my God. Okay, the Hawaiian kahunas call this presence the Epa. The Algonquin tribes in Native Americans in the mainland refer to it as Wendigo or Wetiko. The Chinese and Tibetan Buddhists, they call it the hungry ghosts of insatiable desire. And, even like Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, referred to it as the deceiving force, the antimimos, the imitator and evil principle. So the more I looked, the more evidence there was that we're dealing with something that we haven't been, as a whole, been willing to really look at, because all this historical documentation about this negative, non-human, non-physical presence, this whisperer, this that just lowers people's consciousness, always takes you to the lowest common denominator. You know, the whole image of the, you know, the angel on one shoulder and the little devil on the other shoulder, whispering in your ear, always trying to get you to do the bad stuff. And it was so ubiquitous. It was so everywhere for thousands of years, far back as I could trace it, for like 7,000 years, that I was like, well, the next question was, well, shoot. I was going to say something else, but he was like, well,
That's okay.
is it, oh, okay. Well, shit. If we've known about it for thousands of years, how come we don't know about it?
Yeah. Well, when you first started thinking about this because of what happened?
Mhm.
How was there a mechanism? Like, how did you imagine it sort of like infecting humanity at that time, and did that change as your research went on? Like, because it's the mechanism is really interesting.
The
Obviously, an
mechanism is
interesting part.
really interesting, and you know, and that's actually the whole thing right there. Because, well, all right, so I'm going to answer my first question before I get to that. You know, it's like, well, if we've known about it for thousands of years, how come we actually don't know about it and address it? And that's what made me start looking at the campaign to keep this presence secret. Because this
Okay.
presence is non-physical. It is a influencer. It is a low frequency and a non-physical being. I called it astral at first, but I don't think that's exactly it. I have now come to feel that it is an interdimensional presence, intelligence that actually weaves between and resides between dimensions, and that actually then penetrates us on the mental level, and penetrates us on the emotional level, specifically wherever we've got wounds, wherever we're hurting, and we're all hurting in one way, shape, form, or another. Wherever we've got gaps in our own psyche, wherever we've got self-doubt, nobody I know has self-doubt, you know, wherever we find self-loathing, all of these are programs that have been brought in to make us actually lower our own frequency and have all these horrific ideas about what humanity actually is. But that comes from this influence. I'm going to call it the archons, for lack of a better.
Yeah. That seems to be like one of the best blanket terms for it, really.
Yeah. And so it is a non-physical. Have you ever had just kind of like this impulse that, you know, like out of the blue, just to do something that isn't very nice? And it's just like, where the hell did that come from? That's not me. You know, that kind of thought, like, I don't know, you're petting a dog, and then all of a sudden there's this weird kind of impulse to just kind of like smack it. It's like, where did that come from? I don't hit dogs. Where did that come from? It's not me. It isn't you.
Ever.
And so there are these nudges, these impulses that, again, if we're psychically vulnerable, if we're emotionally vulnerable,
what about physically vulnerable? I mean, does it rarely come as well physically, like as an actual possession, or?
Absolutely, it works as a possession. Absolutely. I think, well, all right. Since I wrote Cracking the Matrix, I thought I was kind of immune to this whole influence because, you know, hey, I'm writing a book about it and I know about it. And then I started uncovering programs in myself that were aligned with childhood abuse issues and wounds, where I was really driven, Graham, driven to succeed, driven to be perfect, driven. And I always thought it was just me, that I was just born a type A personality. And I've been working with a particular healer in Santa Fe, Robin Duda, she's a soul alchemist there. And she works with a lot of people who are recovering from satanic ritual abuse, mind control programs, things like that. And she's helped me to understand a lot of my own impulsing isn't really me, that I have, like, we're all subject to this influence. And, the whole spiritual agenda is to become as good as we can, become as pure as we can, become as high level of consciousness and mind as we can. And there's so much pressure in the New Age community, especially on getting out of the body. I'm going to cycle back to the original point about if we've known about it for thousands of years, why don't we know about it? One of the ways is by trivializing this presence. This is very successfully what Christianity has managed to do by creating something called Satan, the devil, and the horns, and the forked tail, and the cloven hooves. Let's make it ludicrous enough so that anybody who has been living in the age of reason for the last 300 years is going to really buy into it. We're going to just dismiss it. That's one way this influence keeps its presence hidden, is by trivializing its presence in superstition and weird stuff. The other way, and the New Age community is equally guilty in this, which was a big surprise and an aha for me, in this whole incessant focus on going out to God, becoming higher, becoming the Christ self, the enlightened self. And it's all this meditative, close your eyes and get out of your body. Well, when you get out of your body, you make room for something else to come in. And you don't even notice it. And then you start thinking certain ways or acting certain ways, and you just think it's you, because you just think it's you. Like, as I say, I thought I was just this driven type A personality, but actually, ever since I was a very young child, and subject to a bunch of abuse, that opened the door for my own wounding and my own open door to having, this influence. And it's not, so many people, they're scared. You start bringing up the topic of evil, and it's like, let's run away. Let's not look at this. We don't want to look at this. Well, yeah, because it's, again, here's another thing. We don't look at it and engage it as a real thing to deal with, because it's too scary. You've got Linda Blair in The Exorcist, and God knows all these other horrific TV shows and movies showing poltergeist and all of this stuff. And so then we fall into fear and give this presence enormous amounts of power. So between the fear factor, the superstition, ludicrous factor, this is just stupid, and anybody who's rational and a modern human being wouldn't believe in any of this stuff, or the get out of your body and go out there to God, because that's where the answer lies, not in the body. Those are the three main methodologies that I've been able to really determine, Graham, that are the ways that we've dismissed and missed this whole influence.
Okay. I got another one that
Yeah.
might add to that, but before that, I think Darren, were you going to ask if it's always there, getting you to
Well, no,
slap
I
the
was going to
dog,
ask if it's always that makes you want to kick the dog. I mean, don't I ever just want to kick the dog? Because
Well,
maybe I'm an
sometimes
asshole,
it's
or maybe the dog kind of pisses me off, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So it's really hard at this point in time to imagine that human beings are actually spirit beings of love. Because, well, look at the state of the world. It's a freaking mess. It's a nightmare. There's so much contention and conflict and anger and greed and corruption. And we have been assiduously trained to think that way about ourselves for so long. And I mean, thousands of years. And that's why religion and we have
original sin and all that.
Yeah. And I mean, original sin. Oh, well, you want an interesting story about how this influence actually works? Let me talk about original sin for a second. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is so cool. But Darren, sometimes that yapping dog in the middle of the night, you just want to go out and kick it to the moon and back. Absolutely. But this influence is such that it is, I guess the best way to put it is anti-life. Not, it's anti-love. It is not about health. It's not about growth. It's not about kindness. It's not about love. It's not about cooperation. It's about control, pain, and suffering, and evoking negative emotions, anger, guilt, remorse, self-doubt, self-hatred, all of those things, because those are the energy, that's its food source, is emotional energy like that. And so if we look at our world, and one of the things that when I really started putting all the pieces together, it was like, holy shit, the whole world started to make sense, why it's such a nightmare and why we're at each other's throats all the time. We have been assiduous, that's why I called it the Matrix. We've been assiduously programmed into self-doubt, self-hatred, violence, conflict, pain, suffering, less than, a slave mentality, if you will, this extremely despairing and self-despising. And the trick about this whole influence is that it's non-physical, okay? It doesn't have enough power to pick up this pen. It's got to get me to pick up the pen for it. Okay. Yes, people are possessed eventually when they have given over so much of their own personality and their own self-love and their own sense of self. When you just, I mean, all right, even spiritual, a lot of spiritual people, a lot of my spiritual friends are just like, they really didn't like themselves. The whole new age spirituality, get out of the body, was built on top of the religious, the body is a palace of sin and corruption, and the body is the disgusting place, and you want to get out of it. And it's like, so there's this program of get out of the body to make room for what? So, and if we are, which I truly do now, not even believe, I know we are spirit. We are beings of love. And when I say love, it's not, oh, I'm nice and kind all the time, even when I don't want to be, which is hypocrisy. Love is fierce. Love is the force that creates and destroys universes, that explodes volcanoes and grows islands. It's all of this. It's life itself. So we've got such infantile ideas about, and romanticized ideas about being nice and what love is, but love is far vaster than the definitions we've ascribed to it. And so if we're beings of pure love, which is fierce and kind and compassionate and doesn't put up with any shit at the same time, that really leaves the door open for who we really are, as long as we're not convinced in our own minds that we're far less than that. And that's the campaign all along, is to make us diminish ourselves in our own minds, because again, this force can't pick up a pen, it can't turn a piece of paper, it can't turn the page. It's got to get us to do it. So the whole agenda is to get us to lower. We're spirit beings of love. We're operating up here on a frequency level, if you will. And this entropic, negative, non-physical intelligence is operating way down here in the basement. It's got to get us somehow, but we're the creators. It can't do it to us. It has to get us to do it to ourselves, to diminish our own light and bring ourselves down, 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 until we're operating at its frequency level. And yes, then we can be taken over and physically possessed. Absolutely. And I think part of the whole AI agenda and moving people into virtual reality scenarios where we're actually moving into 2D reality, that just wide opens the door for penetration by this influence.
You're not going to go into the metaverse? Okay, you're not going to upload?
No.
Probably
no. No, I'm not. Oh my God. I'm gonna.
Well, here I have a question about the. You mentioned the three things, and how does our cultural thoughts about our subjectivity about evil fit into this? Because you know, I flip flop back and forth all the time. I mean, one of our guests, Malcolm Bendall, I loved his definition of evil. It was very, very simple. Evil is somebody like non-empowerment. It was like good was empowerment and evil was like non-empowering. Like whatever's non-empowering you is evil. It's that evil force. But there is it's kind of tantalizing sometimes when they say it's subjective, you know, like things can be used for good and for evil. So like, let's say a symbol like Baphomet, even like Baphomet wasn't created to be evil. It was used later on and it became evil. Now it's an evil symbol, but it wasn't like that. Or let's say, you know, other sort of ancient wisdom type stuff, like where, you know, it's like, how does that play into it? Because I feel like sometimes I'm like, okay, well, this can be used for good or evil. It's not like evil, you know, inherently evil, you know, may not be a thing. Isn't it based on our perception and our subjectivity? Like, you know, what if you know, even like the evil people, right? Some of you might say, well, like this is evil going on in the world, but do they think they're evil? Do they think they're doing good? So how does that play into it?
With number one, I'm going to back up all the way to empowerment, the definition of empowerment. Yeah. Well, you know, it depends on what your definition of power is. If it's power over yourself and being able to master your own emotions and if you're the master of your own self, that's one thing. If you're into power over dynamics over other people and you're working in a hierarchical sort of structure, that kind of empowerment, I wouldn't call it evil, but I would certainly call it destructive. Yet it's interesting that evil spelled backwards is live.
Live evil.
So you know, so what I've finally come to take it out of the woo scary cat, I'm gonna suck blood all your life, you know, that kind of evil, to take the fear factor out of it. I look at evil as that which is anti-life. Life is about growth, health, creation. And it's all in, everything is interconnected. So it's about support, mutual support. And all of those things. You look at nature is life. And so the antithesis, and I often call it in my book, Cracking the Matrix, I often refer to it as the anti-life force, because it feeds on everything that is the antithesis of health. And it lives to foster and create the environments to ensure its food supply of conflict, unhappiness, misery, despair, fear, all of that. Can I segue back to, I was going to talk about original sin for a second?
Yep.
Thank you.
Was that eating the apple? Is that the original sin again?
Well, yeah, exactly. You know, this whole story about that being in the physical body is, the body is corrupt. The physical earth is a cesspit of sin and corruption, and only God, which is not physical, is good and pure. And so original, yes, and of course it's all around this amazing silly story about Eve and apples and serpents and all of that, and getting booted out of the Garden of Eden. Because if you're a sinful creature, of course you're going to get booted out of Eden, because you can't sustain there because you're a piece of poo. So anyway, so where did the idea of original sin come from?
It was Eve. It was the girl. It was,
well, no, it arrived. It arrived. Oh dear God, I'm having a brain fart. Oh God.
It arrived from the church.
Well, it arrived from the church, and it arrived from, oh God, not Thomas.
John?
Oh no, not God. Well, we're told.
No, John. Did you say John, Darren?
John.
John.
I am having a total space cadet moment, but there was a.
Now I know the outro song at least.
Damn.
Was it one of the Gospels, like Thomas, John, Paul?
No, it wasn't Paul, but one of the early Christian teachers in 263 AD came up with the idea of original sin. He was a drunk, a reprobate. His mom was Christian, his dad was pagan.
Constantine? No.
Close. It's during the time of Constantine. Damn. Anyway, he ran across the teaching of Manichaeism, which preceded about 200 AD. Okay, so Manichaeism was taught by this guy called Mani, the prophet of Babylon. So Mani, the prophet of Babylon, came up with the first idea of original sin. And so he
Augustine.
Augustine, God bless you, Darren. Thank you. Yay.
Don't thank me. Thank
you.
the AI.
Thank Google. So Mani, the prophet of Babylon, taught that the body was corrupt, that, you know, and the whole point of getting to God was to get out of the body, to flagellate the body, to purify the body, to despise the body, to hate your own humanity, because your humanity was the problem. So Mani, the prophet of Babylon, came up with that one. Augustine of Hippo, thank you. Augustine of Hippo, he's a little drunken reprobate whose Christian mommy is despairing of his life and his soul. He runs across this whole teaching and he goes, "That's why I'm such a bad boy. It's my body's fault. It's not my fault." So he embraces Manichaeism, and then he becomes Christian, and then he becomes a philosopher, and then he introduces the whole Manichaeistic original sin concept into Christianity. It is adopted by Constantine. Thank you very much, Graham. And so we have this teaching now, 2,000 years later, of original sin, where we're pieces of shit. You can't trust the body, can't trust the emotions. Sexuality is filth. So we hate ourselves. We're in shame. So what's feeding in the background?
Yeah, that's just perpetuating the whole cycle. Yeah,
that's exactly. So we've got now 2,000 years of epigenetic programming in our DNA of shame and self-hatred. Now the question comes, well, where did Mani get the idea of original sin?
Yeah, you know what's funny? I was just starting to think about all the influences from these important philosophers and writers and researchers in our past that have had like demonic experiences, not demons, but demonic. Like it was just accepted that they had almost like what's a wizard has a familiar, almost like a familiar, you know, part of themselves talking to them from another dimension or whatever. I mean, and how much has that influenced us? I mean, even John Dee, who basically is responsible in some indirect ways for the whole British Empire, and he was his mentor had a little thing twittering in his ear. Like there's example after example of this affecting where we're at right now.
So that's exactly what happened. Mani, the prophet of Babylon, had a voice that would talk to him, whisper in his ear. He called it his other self. He didn't know what it was. But this voice told him all about the corruption of the human body and how bad people were. And so now, 2,000 years later, if you ask me, the most torturous, corrupting teaching that has ever impacted humanity more negatively, I don't think it's possible, is the whole idea of original sin and the corruption of the human being and how foul we are. So we've bought into this program. So what does that do? Shame, guilt, remorse, self-hatred. Lower my light, lower my light, lower my light. God is out there. Love is out there. It's not in me. Lower my light, lower my light, lower my light. This is how this influence works. It whispers in the night. It whispers in some guy's ear. And all of a sudden, you know, he's standing on a pulpit pounding, going away and saying this. And then 2,000 years later, you have billions of people believing in that they're horrible.
I think somebody in the chat here.
Sometimes they're holding it back together a little better than the ones. I mean, I'm not going to point any fingers, but there's some non-Christian societies and civilizations out there that are pretty barbaric still, you know, and, you know, pretty fucking off the chains. And if I was just supposed to look at it like from the lens of like, I'm just an alien and like, here's some fill in the blank society and another fill in the blank society. And then here's these Christian societies, you know, and I'm an Indian, not a Christian. Feather, not a dot. You know, it'd be hard not to tend towards these quote unquote Christian societies.
Well, who is it? I forget who is the person who said one time Christianity is a great idea if we'd only practice it. Yeah, it certainly is. Love and compassion for one another. Treat your neighbor as yourself. Well, going back to what the bleep do we know? If we're all in the quantum field and everything is one thing, which is what science has quantum physics has basically proven. Well, then my neighbor really is me. In more ways
the
than
deaf
one.
chick, right? What the bleep do we know is the deaf girl?
Oh, the deaf chick. Yes.
Yeah. I remember that
Carly
one. That was actually, I remember watching that because I wasn't into any of this stuff. And it was just like me and my buddies all stoned out and we rented it for some reason to throw it on. And we're just like, what the fuck is going on?
I bet it blew your mind.
Here we are.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, no, exactly. So so this is how this influencer works from the non-physical. It's a whisper campaign, and it's all about getting us who are the creative power here to create our own downfall and to create our own matrix and imprisonment.
Interesting. So Grateful Preps NJ says it was in the Bible prior to Augustine. Now, you did say that, right? It did come from an earlier time, but he's the one that.
Yeah, it originally came from Mani, as I say, around 235 AD, something like that. Yeah, and it had, you know, again, you know, he's not the only person that this idea has been pushed to. So yeah, it's like whoever's the weakest vessel, whatever the weakest mind is, that's where it's going to come through. That's one of the reasons that doing a lot of drugs and alcohol isn't the greatest idea, because we just open up our auric field for penetration.
Yeah, I was going to mention addiction earlier when you were naming all those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, why are we so freaking addicted? Well, we hate ourselves. So I may as well just get drunk. Or whatever.
From the original sin?
Huh?
Or is that from the original sin?
What?
Or is that just from, like, I don't know what that's from. It does seem to be a thing, though, that everyone needs to overcome on their own basis, regardless of their background. I wonder, do you know, is there any sort of cultures that seem to be afflicted with it less, with self-hate less?
Well, I think probably, you know, like the original Polynesian cultures. Yeah. Before Christianity came in the door. I hate to point the finger at Christianity, but the focus has not been on love.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So, you know, the ideal of what Christ stood for, supposedly, is beautiful. But like so many things, if we're looking at hierarchical power structures, you know, you got this dude called the Pope, and, you know, at the top, and which, oh my God, you know, you guys are into, you know, all this stuff just as well as I do, the whole satanic influence in the whole Catholic Church and on, which if you're looking at power, it's not even suspect. If you're looking at a power over hierarchical structure that wants control, then you're dealing with this force.
So the people that are following this unintentionally or subconsciously they think they're doing good. They think they're doing something for the greater good, let's say, for humanity. They're kind of, they don't know that they're being evil.
Well, it depends. Here we go back to what's your definition of evil? You know, I will never be able to say, you know, the ritual rape of a baby. I can only call that evil.
No, I'm thinking more of like subtle stuff, like, you know, wanting to tattle on your neighbors for not doing certain things, you know?
You know,
it comes back to that simple definition of like, that's disempowering to me.
Human nature. You know, I'm not going to even try to pretend that I know the answer. You know, I've got the understanding that I know we're spirit, and I know spirit is of love, life, It's at this very high frequency. How far we've gone into the dark, if you will, I really don't know. It's hard for me, and I'm sure I run across a lot of people when I talk about, oh, we're spirit beings of pure love, and they go, well, that's bullshit. Because I tattle on my neighbor and I kick my dog and, and I hit my kid and yada, yada, yada. It's like, what is human nature? I wish I could say, oh, yes, human nature is XYZ. I think originally human nature was totally just aligned with the purity of life. But that doesn't mean that you just roll over and that you don't stand up for yourself. It doesn't mean that you don't, if somebody's threatening your wife or your child, it doesn't mean you don't put a bullet through their freaking head.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. That's where love can bite. So what are some of the keys?
Life doesn't put up with that shit.
Yeah, exactly. What are some keys then because what do we do here? I mean, how do we get through this? Because it's becoming, there's kind of a great awakening happening. Obviously, there's some sort of shift happening, but I mean, how is this going to play out? What should we do? Like, what are some of the keys for ourselves? Or is this truly a different time now, a different space? Like, are we in? Because how sometimes it feels like we are in unbelievable moments right now. Like, it's fascinating to watch everything happen. Or is it always like that? I mean, are the scales going to tip?
No, the scales have already tipped, if you ask me, and you just did. So I think the scales have already tipped. And what's happening and why everything is turning to shit in front of our very eyes is because as there is more and more the force of love, real love, not romantic, silly love, but the force of love, the force of life, the life force itself is rising more and more, and it's pushing all this shit to the surface. It's really like popping a zit. All the stuff that's been suppressed, hidden, and is now rising to the surface. We're seeing it. I mean, COVID was the most, talk about the Great Awakening. It's not it's not the doggone awakening I was hoping for when I used to be a spiritual person. I just wanted to sit on a cloud of light and bliss and float off into the golden sunset or whatever. And it's just like, oh, I'm going to have to awake to what's really going on. I'm going to have to grow up and really address the dark inside of me and learn about my own light. And I'm going to have to learn how to love myself. Oh boy. Okay.
So is that what one of the main keys comes back to is love is yourself?
It really does. So, well, what's the last thing we're taught? To love ourselves? No, we're not taught that. So that really is bottom line the key. But, the best place to start is to recognize that this influence doesn't have a freaking bit of power, except we give it to it with our own fears, our own superstitions, our own self-doubt. So number one is that. The big thing, Graham, is that if you look at the tone and the tenure and the program of the Matrix, it's all about get out of your body, get distracted, hook up to AI, virtual reality, whatever, because you're untrustworthy. Your brain can't compute as well as AI, and you're going to be a lapdog to AI if you don't hook up. All these fear-based messages about, take the vax, take the whatever, the neural lace implant, et cetera, is about divorcing ourselves from our bodies. The body is actually the key. And that's why there's been such a violent campaign against the body for so many thousands of years. Because
does that include like the Falun Gong stuff and stuff like that in China? Is that connected to that? Is that like their version of the same thing?
I don't know. I'm really not familiar with that movement, I must admit. So what I advise, what I've done for myself to unhook and to move beyond this influence and into my own power, because that's the whole freaking key. We're going to come back to empowerment, is moving into our own genuine power, who we really are. If we are beings of love, whatever that is, life itself. Again, growth, evolution, creativity, community, communions, mutual support, interconnection. Those are all life force impulses. So the more we can disconnect from the media matrix, the more we can disconnect. I'm sitting here on an Ethernet cable. I finally unhooked my Wi-Fi. I finally got it. And the lessening of the EM frequency fields in my house has been shocking. My body is actually on a cellular level has calmed down so much just by turning off my frickin' Wi-Fi. And I have a faster connectivity with an Ethernet cable anyway.
Noticeably, noticeably. Yeah.
Noticeably. Is it a pain in the ass to walk around the house with my laptop with a 50-foot Ethernet cable driving me? Yes, it is.
Well, you could just run a lot of that on data. Like, what about, can you run it off your phone or no?
No, I can't. I'm in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean, and cell reception sucks. So be in nature more. You know, we're talking about fields. We're talking about information fields. We're talking about frequency. Life is high frequency. We're talking about this anti-life force. Well, what's the opposite of the anti-life force is life. And life isn't about just, you know, sucking down the bourbon, watching Netflix, you know, 8 hours a night. Get out in nature as much as possible. Take your frickin' sandals and shoes off and walk barefoot. Get grounded to the electromagnetic field of the earth. If you can, spend 15, 20 minutes a day, literally sitting your butt on the ground with a phone in the house, not on you, and be with yourself. Be with life. Start to tune in and listen to what the messages of life are. You know, the body is this amazing conduit of intelligence.
So not even meditating, not trying to escape, just be there.
Nope. Don't try to get out of the body. It's about, you know, God almighty. I spent 40 freaking years, Graham, trying to get up and out, only to turn around and find out it's about down and in.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was the same way. I was always thinking like, I don't want to be grounded. I want to, you know.
Yes, that's the program. See how insidious this is? It's like everything in my life has been turned on its head in the last 4 years.
Yeah, totally. I get it.
Yeah.
So what is weed ungrounding or grounding? Graham?
It's very ungrounding.
I'm
it's very ungrounding. I'm sorry, dude. I've spent numerous decades doing every plant medicine on the planet. Been there, done that. I have so many t-shirts in the closet. So I'm not against it. But I also know what a doorway to other influences it is and how ungrounding it is. The whole point, and this gets really intoxicating at a certain point,
mostly
Darren.
Potato chips.
Oh, well, you know, but is it the unsaturated PUFA potato chips? Yeah.
Well, it used to be. My wife has been making me chips. So my wife makes me chips. She fries them up in the ghee or in the, what's it called when you make it out of
tallow?
Tallow, yeah.
Really? Good for her. Good for you.
Good for me, mostly. Yeah.
So it's the simple stuff. There really are. The solution is to turn around to life itself again and to start listening and trusting our own internal compass. Because the other part of the whole program for all these thousands of years is to not trust ourselves. That's the bottom line. You cannot trust yourself. You cannot trust your body. You cannot trust your intuition. You cannot trust your feelings. You can't trust your emotions. That's been the message. So what are we going to do if we can't trust ourselves? We're going to go to outside authority. So it's automatic. If I have completely kneecapped myself, then I'm only going to turn to external authority. And then I'm subject to total control. So the whole is getting back in the body and start listening to your own inner voice. That's the guide.
I like it. What about more of like the big picture stuff on how this awakening, like how are they going to push back, or how is it this metaphysical sort of interdimensional force going to push back when it sees this, like you said, this life force rising up, right? Wow.
Well, we're seeing the pushback. The pushback is in more desperate mandates, more desperate control, more desperate pointing the finger at the other guy, all of the above, the World Economic Forum, the UN, all of that, trying to, what is it? Not Project 2030, but yeah, all of that.
Yeah, 2030. Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
that's
2 of them now. Isn't there a 2025 too? Is that Trump's version?
Yeah,
All that.
yeah, 15-minute cities, all this stuff.
We
So it's
live
like,
right by an actual 15-minute city where they're like advertising it. They're like celebrating it.
I know. Yeah. I think one of the last bastions to fall for me was the whole climate change thing. To finally see climate change as a manipulation by the globalists to get us to willingly ourselves turn off our electric stuff, turn off our gas ovens, and hook up to AI. It's just like, oh, let's do it for climate change on the planet. It's just like, oh God,
Crazy.
it is crazy.
I like it. I like the advice. Can we talk about your new book coming up that you've been working on
Yeah.
before we run out of time? I mean,
yeah, no, that's called Gender, Patriarchy, and Sexual Mind Control: Breaking Free.
Gender, patriarchy, and sex. Okay.
Well,
Oh,
if you, yeah, oh boy, it's a hot potato. It is not politically correct.
In which direction? Now I need a teaser.
Yeah, no, take a look at the whole trans agenda. I mean, we're looking at lowering the birth rate on this planet, and any way we can do it, whether it's through pollution, whether it's through EM fields, whether it's through trans agendas. The whole if we are these powerful beings and our body, which isn't even physical, come on, you watch What the Bleep Do We Know?
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a quantum field appearing as physical.
Right.
So, if all of this can be manipulated from a physical perspective, then that's what they want us to do. So what did you just say? I lost track.
No. We were go ahead, Darren.
Well, I was just wondering about the feminism aspect of it, because you mentioned that, and that's just definitely a buzzword around here, because as near as I can tell, it's near ruined the place.
Which house?
Feminism. And and they've like piled the trans agenda onto the end of that. It just seems to be the next version of it. It's like, instead of 6th wave feminism, we're just going to have 1st wave transgenderism.
Absolutely. It's all being agendized to turn us against one another and to compartmentalize, fragment, so that we're all in pieces fighting at each other, and we miss the whole big picture of what really has been going on. I concur.
I think where you're going is the importance of your body, and that quantum sort of like thing about the body, and why can't we just accept what the body we're in type thing. I think you were going there, right?
Yes, I was. It's incredibly impotent. And sexuality is one of the most fraught, emotional, easily conflicted, back to conflict. Let's create as much problems between each other as we can. Let's divide the sexes into male and female and have the battle of the sexes. Who thought that up? I get into that in this book because it is all agendized to keep us at each other's throats and to get out of the body and never ground in it and start being seated in our own actual power. And, and here's something I will say is, for example, patriarchy, the whole idea of patriarchy. Come on, you two white dudes, you're the scum of the earth.
Well, Darren's an Indian, so.
Okay. All right. So I got a lot of Native American. But but it's like, I finally realized that men didn't create patriarchy. Men didn't create patriarchy.
Women did, because they just wanted to be patriarchy.
No, it's about this force. It's about the archons. What can I do to diminish human power? Okay. So the patriarchy is the twisting of the masculine into something violent, crude, cruel, and conflict ridden. So if you look at in terms of energy, and you look at the original idea about the yin and the yang systems of energy, I mean, when creation happened and the Big Bang happened, the thing that was created first within less than a second was positrons and electrons. The positive electromagnetic force and the negative electromagnetic force, the yang and the yin. These are energy qualitative characteristics. For example, the yang is pointed, sharp, direct, linear, structured. Those are yang characteristics. Well, okay, dudes, more structured. You got a penis that's pointed and hard. You've got all these different aspects of the masculine called the yang, beautifully balanced with all of the yin, the receptive, fertile, female, dark versus light, round and soft versus hard and pointed, on and on and on, yang and yang, yang and yin, qualitative electromagnetic energetic qualities.
And within every yang, there's a little bit of yin, and with every yin, there's a little bit of yang.
Yang, exactly. But if you take
Oh, we just froze. Your Ethernet cable must have unplugged. we just we just froze.
Yeah. Oh, am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. So if you remove the yin, the softer, gentler, the communicative, the intuitive, the nonlinear, all of that, if you remove that from the yang, then you're left with an unbalanced force called the yang, the positive electromagnetic force, or the masculine. So patriarchy is the distortion of the electromagnetic frequency that we embody by removing all that's yin and then amplifying the yang until it becomes totally unbalanced. That's patriarchy. Men didn't create that. We were driven and programmed into that. Just
all
one.
right. Yeah.
Just,
like
just
that.
one
I
more
like
element to this whole picture. Yeah.
I like it.
Well, I was worried for a second there, Kate, but you pulled up. I was like, oh no, she's a feminist.
Feminism. Okay.
The first wave was probably all right. You know, there's like, but it still had, I think it still had sinister motivations from the very beginning, from the communists.
Well, all right. What's behind?
You think it's the archives, but I think it's
absolutely
the communists. Because, you know, maybe the same thing.
Well, just like patriarchy has been a bastardization of the yang electromagnetic principle of the positive force, the whole feminism is not about equality. How can women having to become men be equality? What's equality is bringing in the appreciation and the balance of the yin energetics of communication, cooperation, receptivity, vulnerability, emotion, intuition. If we reintroduce the feminine yin into our social structure, then we have social balance electromagnetically of the yang and the yin. That's equality. Me growing a dick is not, and having to go out and compete and beat the guys is not equality for me.
They actually cut it out of your arm.
I know, or out of your thigh.
Yeah,
or your thigh. I know, I've got a friend who did that. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
They might go crazy.
I mean, I just love it how we had you on, like, because I didn't know about this, and you know, I had you on to talk about cracking the matrix, but I love when we have guests on and like you're kind of on the same page with us already, you know, like you're kind of following obviously the same. I don't know. It's just fascinating to me,
isn't it?
Yeah.
It
really is.
It goes on and on. There is not an aspect to life, not education, not politics, not medicine, not science, philosophy. Nothing is untouched by this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's you know, Elon's been saying it's the mind virus. I mean, it's getting some pretty mainstream attention. I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, I buy everything he's selling, but I mean, it's an interesting time because it is like, even not even to get political, but it is getting like mainstream attention, right? They're calling it the woke mind virus, for example. I mean, this is at the most popular people in the world are talking about this. So it's what a fascinating time to see what shakes out, you know?
Yep, it is. It's extraordinary. I know Elon, I really want to trust him. And when he started pushing Neuralink, he lost me.
Yeah, I know. I was going to ask you about that because
Yeah,
me too, kind of. But I mean, he's still trying to say it's to help people that need help. Like
it has a great application.
yeah.
Absolutely.
It's
Well,
funny because you'd think he'd have lost ground when our show account was banned. It hasn't been reinstated for 3 years.
I blame the Canadian government for that. It's not Elon's fault, but
Can't be Elon.
oh,
Kate,
God.
this has been fantastic. Where can people find all your stuff? Is there any social media they can follow you on and all that sort of fun
Yeah, well,
stuff?
I've been kicked off of Facebook so many times I don't even bother anymore. So they can find me on Substack. And so it's Cate Montana is Cate with a C. So my Substack is the initial C, montana.substack.com. Or they can go to my website, catemontana.com.
yeah, you look like you're pretty active on there, right? You got some posts, like three posts in last week there, or
Oh,
three.
yeah. Yeah, I'm very active on Substack.
And you're liking the Substack so far?
I do. It is it's a very coherent, cohesive group so far, and it's pulled in deeply intellectual, thoughtful people.
Awesome.
On many, many levels. So I've been very pleased with the platform so
That's
far.
great.
Fingers
Great.
crossed.
Yeah, awesome. That's good.
And I'll plug my book, Cracking the Matrix.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's the subtitle there? 14 keys.
14 keys to individual and global freedom.
Nice. Right on. Well, thanks. We appreciate you coming on the show.
This has been a lot of fun. And when the other book comes out, if you want to dive deeper into the whole sexual conundrum.
Okay. All right. Let's keep in touch for sure.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Yeah. Us too. Take care.
And that was a chat. Cate Montana. What'd you think?
Oh yeah, that was fantastic. Yeah, I'm glad we booked it, and big thanks to her for coming on last minute. We had an opening last minute, so
yeah, that was great. Good show. Good show. Big thanks to Cate for coming on the show. Of course, big thanks to you guys for listening. Big thanks for being especially our supporters, our nobles. So if you want to be a noble, head over to Grimerica.ca/support today. Sign up for a monthly or make a one-time donation, and you'll be extra special. And we'll love you. And the show will keep going because of you. So if you could do all those things, Grimerica.ca/support. Sign today. Of course, contact at the cabin for the trips. You still time. I mean, you can't come hunting. It's too late for that. But you could still just decide to come in last minute right now, jump on a plane next weekend and come hang out with us in a very small group. So it's going to be super good one to get to. If you're like scared of crowds or something like that, you want to come just meet the people, head over to contact@thecabin.com and check that. And of course, adultbrain.ca for all those audiobooks. Check all that out, guys, and support the show. Grimerica.ca/support. Other than that, we love you guys. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.